Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Doooooobious Spookulation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, with it being Halloween, I thought we could look at Bitcoin in a more dubious and spooky way. So one of the things that I was thinking about, like, well, what could we talk about that sounds scary? And one of the things that we can sometimes talk about that sounds scary is the death cross, right? Like what sounds scarier in a market than saying something's going to have a death cross? And so what I thought we could do is maybe just look at a potential upcoming death cross for Bitcoin. Now, death crosses in and of themselves are not great indicators because they're lagging. By definition, the death cross indicator is a lagging indicator because it's based on moving averages, which lag the price. So, a lot of times when you have a golden cross, the price of Bitcoin dumps. And a lot of times when you have a death cross, the price of Bitcoin rallies. Now, we've gone through this many times. And what's interesting is, despite how frequently we say it, the same thing just keeps on happening. And every time people go through the motions of, well, if everyone thinks it's going to happen, then it won't. And it just keeps on happening. Let's go through a couple examples. If you look at the last golden cross that Bitcoin had, it was in May. And we actually did a video on it back then and said, look, guys, while a golden cross sounds good, and you're going to be seeing it all over the place over the next few weeks, usually when a golden cross happens, Bitcoin dumps 10 to 15%. I believe we even said expect a 10 to 15% dump after the golden cross. And we got one, right? We got a 12% drop. Now, the overall rally continued, but we still got a 12% drop. And before that, we had a death cross on April 6th. And what did we say back then? We said, look, normally Bitcoin rallies after a death cross. And again, should they be named something else? Maybe. But that's what they're named. So usually on golden crosses, the short-term move is a dump. And on death crosses, the short-term move is a pump. If you believe that, then the only thing left to figure out, there's two things. First of all, will the death cross occur? And second of all, if we get a death cross and the price rallies, can it go to an actual new all-time high? So let's think about that. First things first. Let's see. Are we going to get a death cross? The death cross, in this case, is defined by the 50-day moving average going below the 200-day moving average. The 50-day moving average right now is at around 114K. Because the price of Bitcoin is less than 114K, and if you go back, say, 50 days, and you look at the fact that we're replacing prices 50 days ago of, what was the price 50 days ago? 115K. We're essentially replacing these prices up here with these prices down here. And so because of that, the 50-day moving average is going to start dropping. It's going to start dropping. Now, the 200-day moving average, if you go back 200 days, to see where Bitcoin was, it was actually at around 84K. So the 200-day moving average continues to climb because we're replacing these lower prices of 84K with higher prices of 109 or 110K. So it seems likely that the 200-day moving average is going to continue to slowly grind up, and it also seems likely that the 50-day moving average is going to start dropping. Now, there is no guarantee that you get a death cross. Like, there's a chance that if price can rally, the death cross could be avoided. And that's actually happened before, right? I think there's times where it has looked like you were going to potentially get a death cross and then it didn't actually happen, right? Like where you start to see the 50-day drop, but then you still don't actually get a death cross. What's interesting is in 2021, when we had a death cross, the price of Bitcoin rallied. Now, there are exceptions, but if you go through most of them, right? If you look at 2023 and you look at 2024 and you look at 2025, you can see that the death cross marked a local low. Now, if you guys remember earlier this year, when we had a death cross, I told you guys back then that we will likely have another death cross in 2025 because that one happened so early. Normally, we get a death cross in the third quarter this cycle, the third quarter, but then this year we got one in early Q2, and it looks like we might get another one in the fourth quarter. Now, if you go back through history, most of the time this works. Like, it doesn't work all the time. In 2019, it also worked. And we've also made comparisons to that. If you look at 2019, when we got a death cross, Bitcoin rallied, right? It rallied. And when it rallied, it actually went up like 43%. Now, back then, that led, unfortunately, to a lower high, but it was still a rally, right? It was still a rally. You can't go back in time and change anything. But it ultimately was still a rally. And you'll notice that Bitcoin dumped into the death cross, right? It dumped into the death cross. And then when we got the death cross, we got a rally out of it. Unfortunately, it marked a lower high. Now, if you go back through history and you look at sort of the death crosses at the end of cycles, you also had a death cross back in March of 2018. And what you'll notice is that if you waited for the death cross to sell, you would end up selling a local low at around 6,700. Now, the high was already in, but then Bitcoin rallied back up to $10,000, right? So it had a rally from the low of about 50%. And so, again, this is something we've seen on repeat. I think we could find some examples where it doesn't play out perfectly. 2021 might be an example or 2022, where you had a death cross and price ended up dumping shortly after the death cross. It still went higher later on, but it is to show you, well, one thing that this sort of has worked out is a lot of times the price on the day of the death cross, usually a month or so after that, the price is higher, right? Yeah. So that is something that kind of continues a month or two. That's something that we've seen play out many, many times. And the reverse is also true, right? When you look at golden crosses, when we've had these prior golden crosses, a lot of times it then leads to a short-term dump. Okay. You can see that happen in 2023. It happens to a lesser extent, in 2024, right? I mean, it didn't really happen if we're being completely honest. In 2025, as we already showed, when you had the golden cross, it led to a 10 to 15% dump. When you had the golden cross in 2024, it rallied into it and then got a dump right on the other side of it. So death crosses sound scary. Usually you get some type of a rally after a death cross. If you don't get one, it might be due to weakness elsewhere. Like maybe the S&P is really weak and then it takes away that potential move by Bitcoin. But it is something to watch over the coming weeks. Because again, if you extrapolate here, you look at this 200-day moving average and you look at the 50-day moving average and start to assume that they're going to head towards each other, it's not going to take that long, right? We should see a death cross in November if the price action of Bitcoin still remains somewhat suppressed from the prior levels. So it is something to think about. The other thing is that 50-week moving average. Again, this is one of those spookier things, right? If you look at the 50-week moving average, if we go below it on weekly closes, then there's a decent chance that it's over for a while, right? Now, the 50-week moving average is currently at around $103,000, so we have a little bit of wiggle room. You could actually overlay the Bollinger Bands and see that in a lot of these prior consolidation phases, Bitcoin tagged that lower part of the Bollinger Bands before it then moved up. And that Bollinger Band low right now here is around the same level as the 50-week moving average. And in 2019, when we had that drop right here, it also found that low around the Bollinger Bands, and then it rallied back up to the midpoint, right? The midpoint. Now, the midpoint right now is about 114, 115K. So I guess you could hope that even if the cycle is over and that's all she wrote for the cycle and we have nothing else to look forward to until maybe 2027, 2028, that if we do come down to the 50-week moving average, there's still a decent chance we could then come right back up to like 115 or so. And then maybe the market starts to accept things. I still think that all things considered, we have to be pragmatic. We have to not just paint rosy pictures just because we want them to be. There is a reality that this cycle, we might not get a euphoria phase. You could even have like the market could even go to all-time highs and you still not get a euphoria phase, right? If Bitcoin were at 140K right now, I truly don't think anyone would care. I think people would care for a few days, but if altcoins aren't going with it, people aren't going to care. So you might have a scenario where we don't have a euphoria phase and it just kind of plays out like the 2019 top, where in 2019, Bitcoin just hovered above 10K for a few months. Just like maybe now it's hovering above 100K for a few months. And then eventually, in the month that QT ended, which it fully came to, it ended in August, but you couldn't actually see it until September, right? It continued through August. In September, when quantitative tightening officially was over, that's when Bitcoin got a drop. So you could argue that the drop for Bitcoin could occur in December. That doesn't mean it has to occur December 1st, but it could occur sometime in December. And so what you're witnessing right now is Bitcoin is able to stay elevated above 100K because it's taking liquidity from the altcoin market. Just like in 2019, Bitcoin was able to stay elevated above 10K because it was taking liquidity from the altcoin market. And if you look at Bitcoin dominance, the spookiest of them of all, you can see that Bitcoin was able to stay elevated while dominance was skyrocketing. You could argue that one of the more bullish cases for Bitcoin is the fact that dominance is still so low. There's still a lot of liquidity that Bitcoin could theoretically take from the altcoin market, right? In fact, in 2019, Bitcoin USD found a top, right, after Bitcoin dominance on the day that Bitcoin dominance put in a new cycle high, right? It was on that day that Bitcoin USD found the 2019 top. So I'm not promising you guys anything. Like, I cannot promise you that Bitcoin's going to go to 130 or 140K, but the best case for it to happen is that if dominance is going to go back up to 66%, right? If dominance is going to go back up to 66%, that's the best chance that Bitcoin has. The best chance. Because what essentially is happening on the Bitcoin dominance chart, people are waking up. As we speak, it's now at 60%. For a lot of altcoin holders, what's spookier than that? And as I've told you guys, for months, we were going into this final rotation where people are going to start converting their altcoins to Bitcoin. And it's happening. And when Bitcoin dominance can get above the bull market support band, it should go a lot higher. A lot higher. And I know I've been saying it for months, but it's happening, right? This is week 7 of Bitcoin dominance going up. I can't convince the degens any faster. This is what's going to happen. They got to figure it out for themselves. So I understand that it's spooky, But Bitcoin represents the best of the cryptoverse. The best of it. Your altcoin is irrelevant to this conversation, right? I'm not talking about your alt. I'm just saying, in general, Bitcoin represents the best of the cryptoverse. And that is why dominance is going to shoot through this. And it should go a hell of a lot higher. So I guess that's the most dubious thing I could say on Halloween. We'll see what Bitcoin can do here, and if Bitcoin dominance can go up. I still am looking at dominance. I see it going higher. It reminds me of this 2019 move where Bitcoin stayed elevated. I will say this, though. I will say this. If Bitcoin dominance does go higher, if it continues to go higher, and Bitcoin USD does whatever it does, as dominance goes higher and higher, assuming that our assessment of this move is correct, the higher dominance goes, we have to start, potentially pivoting, especially as quantitative tightening approaches an end in December. So I'll leave you with this. What are the odds that dominance tops in December? Because I'm starting to think that's the most likely outcome. It would be perfect. It would be perfect. Bitcoin dominance tops in December. Why would it be perfect? Because quantitative tightening ends in December. And last cycle, when QT ended, that's when Bitcoin dominance topped, right? And I know everyone wants to front run everything, but that's when it topped. And now QT is going to end in December. Additionally, if you look at total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, it found a low the week of December 4th, 2017. So again, I ask you, what are the chances that alt Bitcoin pairs in general, this is total 2, so 0.58, it's not used to what you're seeing. You're used to me looking at total 3, which is a 0.37. What are the odds that this thing just comes right back down by early December and then tries to find a low right there? But dominance will be higher because alt Bitcoin pairs could be putting in lower lows and ultimately going to the long awaited target of 0.25. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.